Now we're ready to start building the light on top of the tower. And as you can see, I've got lots of pieces and parts laid out here in front of me, but we're going to separate this basically into 3 sections: building the walls, building the roof, and building the deck. So we're going to start with the walls, and I have here my lower walls, my 8 pieces of my lower walls, and my 8 pieces of my upper walls. And we're going to join the lower walls in this orientation, and I'm just going to use some joining strips in between them this way. And then to join the upper section, since it's so narrow, instead of using a lot of tiny little joining strips, I've just cut a strip of cardstock that's slightly less than 1/2 inch, and I'll just use that and put them along in a line like this. So I'll get those attached into rings and then I'll be back. So as you can see, I've finished making my upper and lower wall sections, and now we need to cut our base and top for these so that they'll have some structure. And according to our cutting guide, we use a square that is 2 3/8, so we need 2 of them, and we're going to cut octagons with 1-inch sides. And to do that, we'll just take our centering ruler and center that on a side, and then we want to mark for 1 inch, so 1/2 inch either side of center, and we'll just do that around all 4 sides. And then when we cut off these diagonals, we should be left with a diagonal that is also 1 inch, and that will give us our octagons that will fit inside of the upper and lower walls. Now for the base octagon, this is all we have to do, is cut the octagon shape. But for the top octagon, we want to cut a circle out that is 1 3/4 inches. So I just took, or you could use a compass. I have a nice giant circle template here, and I just centered a 1 3/4 inch circle, or you could find the center and draw it with your compass, and then just cut it out with your craft knife. It'll probably take you a couple passes around, but it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be perfectly centered. It should be as close as possible, but it doesn't need to be perfect. And then the one with the circle is going to go inside of our upper walls, and we can just use a little glue and then pop that in. And the one that is solid is going to go inside of our lower walls. Again, just use a little bead of glue on the inside here and pop that in. So I'm going to do that and be back when they're dry. So now that our upper and lower wall sections, the glue is set up, we can go ahead and cover them with some pattern paper. And I've cut, for the upper section, I've cut a strip that is 9 inches long by 1 3/8 wide. And for the lower section, it's 9 inches long by 2.5 inches wide. And I want to do a little scoring. So the first thing we want to do is on the lower piece is to score a 1/2 inch in on either side. And that'll give us our 1.5 inches in the center. And on the upper piece, we're going to score a 1/2 inch in on the bottom and 3/8 on the top. half on the bottom and 3/8 on the top. Now for both of these pieces, we're going to score this at 1 1/16 intervals. Now I'll show you how I'm going to do that, but if you say, oh, that's not for me, you can simply just wrap around and not have the panel look. So on this kind of a scoreboard, there is a little indentation or a mark that shows halfway between 0 and the first 1/8 inch score. This is scored in eighths. If you don't have that kind of mark, you'll just take your paper and put that edge so that it is halfway between 0 and the first 1/8 mark, and then you'll score at 1 1/8 inches. 1 1/8 inches is your first score. Now take that score and take it up to find the 2-inch mark, and you'll want to line up that score we just made in between the 2-inch mark and the 1 7/8 inch mark. So, and then we'll mark at 3. So that gives us 1 1/16 inches. And then if we take that mark that we just did at 3 and we slide it back 1/16 of an inch, then we can score at 4. And we'll just proceed doing that all the way down. Once you make a score, move it back 1/16 of an inch, and then make the next score. And that you'll end up with a tab at the end so that you can have something to secure it. And you'll repeat that process for the small piece of paper as well. So I'm just going to lightly fold on each of the vertical score marks and do a dry fit around here, starting with the tab, a 1/2 inch tab, and wrapping around. And you should end up with a nice fit around the walls by doing that. So I'm going to prep with some score tape, and then I'll be back to show you how I wrap. So I've prepped with score tape. The strip in the center might have been overkill, but it just looked a little blank in there without it, so I added a strip in there. And so I'm just going to start by removing the tape from this section on the 1/2 inch tab, and using my scores on the top and the bottom, get that 1/2 inch tab lined up here. Peek in here and get it centered in between one of the panels. And once you've got that tab secured, you should be able to remove the remaining tape that is on the just the body to begin with and wrap around. So that's what I'm going to do next. And then before you get to fastening this last end, just pull back the tape backing on the top and the bottom, because there'll be a little overlap. We'll probably trim some of that overlap off. And then just don't forget to ink that raw white edge of your paper there as you come around. And now to do the wrapping, at each one of these intersections, just remove a little wedge. Now I've already taken the score tape backing off just so that I don't have to remove a whole lot of small pieces. I'm cutting out a wedge about like that. Go around the whole thing and then put these pieces down, and then I'll be back. So I've got the pattern paper on the lower walls here. You can see I've put it to the bottom, and I just did the same snipping and put it to the top and made sure I've burnished really well all around. So then I'm going to repeat this for the top part, and the only thing I would say is, okay, the the 3/8 score goes towards the top, and you may want to check and make sure that you don't need to give it a little trim before you put it down to make sure it's not going past this hole. Or actually, what you can do is put it down and then just flip it over and give it a cut once it's on there if anything overhangs. To add the windows to the lighthouse, I'm going to start with plastic that is 3 inches tall, and I think in order to make these pieces fit inside of here, they're going to have to be slightly smaller than 1 inch wide. So what I've done is I've scored pretty deeply on my plastic here, every 15/16, so a 1/16 less than 1 inch. And then I just cut that off when I got to the end. Now I'm just going to try to bend these, but if it snaps like that one just snapped, don't worry about it if it comes into pieces, because we're going to be attaching this with score tape, and they can even all be individual. It doesn't matter. It'll be okay. So I've got mine that far. Then I'm going to take the protective backing off of here. And this should fit inside. Now, if you end up with individual pieces, you can put the individual pieces in, and what we'll do is we'll put some score tape down around the inside of the bottom down there, and then we'll put this piece in. But you could just as easily do individual pieces. So I'm going to put my score tape around in the bottom there, and then I'll be back. So I have my plastic attached inside of the bottom. And one other thing I'd like to do is, because the inside of this bottom may show through, the windows are kind of big, I've cut a strip of 1 3/8 inch wide paper, and I've got it 8.5 inches long. That's probably a little bit longer than it needs to be. You can measure it. I'll just measure it by putting it in a circle here. What I want to do is just put this paper down inside, and it actually doesn't, you can see I put some score tape on there, but actually I don't even know if you need to add score tape. You could or not, and I can see that I can cut off probably another 1/2 inch. So I'm just going to put that down inside of there just so it'll be nice and finished looking if you were to look through the windows. Now, before we attach the upper walls to our wall assembly, we need to think about our light. And I'm going to use one of these wine bottle lights, and I've got the information about that in the materials guide. Now, if another option would be to use one of these LED tea lights. Now, if you use an LED tea light, you can see that it's quite a bit shorter, so you'll need to make a little platform for the tea light to sit on, and that's what I'll show you now. So it starts with it's just a little rectangular box. The sides are 5/8 inch by inch and a quarter, inch and a half, 5/8 by 1.5 inches, and then we have a top and a bottom that are 1.5 inches. And I've already attached these a little bit. We're just going to use butt joints to put this together, and we can just fold this around And the edges just kiss here. Now obviously this top, you can't reach in and put any burnishing on them, but we'll just put it down here with kissing edges, and then we'll hold it in place with a piece of white cardstock. Now this piece of cardstock has been cut 2 7/8 inch square, and then I scored it at 5/8, and then 1 5/8 inches past that, so that it, and then I've just cut the corners off so that it'll fit on right on like this. So let me put that on. So now we have a nice little platform that we can glue into the bottom of our light. Actually, it'll just kind of fit down in there. You probably don't even have to glue it in. And then the tea light will sit right on top of there. Now, if you think that's a little bit, if you don't want to see the tea light at all, then you would want to make the sides a little bit shorter. Kind of depends on the depth of your tea light. This one I see is just a little bit taller than some of the ones I usually use. So if you don't want to see the edge of the tea light, then make the walls a little bit shorter, like 1/2 inch or so. And then that can sit in there. Now, you don't glue it in there, because the reason that we've got this hole in the top is that we'll be able to reach in and pull it out. Now for the light that goes into a wine bottle, you can, this part pulls off on the kind that I have, and so you could just glue this base into the center and then just pull the light out when you need to charge it up. So that's what I'm going to do, and then I'll be back. So instead of gluing my my light here in, I just used a piece of score tape on the bottom. That way, if it needs to be replaced, I can easily pull it out, whereas if I use some glue, it may be more challenging to do so. So now we can just remove our score tape backing here and put our upper walls on. Now, you may want to do this a little bit at a time, because this is a kind of a snug fit. I think if we get a tab started here, and then put this down on top, then we should be able to pull this tab, just kind of gently pull it, and that'll work. That should work. Attach each one of those, and if you were just the individual ones, you could do that as well. And now that is our wall assembly completed.